Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the Not So Perfect Bigfoot Show. Tonight, I have Mark Green with me. Mark Green is an Alabama boy, or should I say an Alabama man. He actually he does have a great YouTube channel. If you haven't checked it out, I want you to write this down. I want you to go check it out. And I had to write this down because I slaughter titles. And if you watch the show, you know I will slaughter an introduction. Cedar Creek Bottom Farmstead Life with Mark and Rebecca Green. This YouTube channel is a very addictive and is very clean. It's something your whole family could watch. He has a lot of great people on the show. They go into a little bit of everything. It's not just about Bigfoot. It's about life and herbs and just people having conversations. And if you like really good people, jump in, join the family. I did, and Mark and Rebecca Green are two very wonderful people. And it is an honor to have Mark on. I had Miss Becca on the other night. If you didn't see her show, please go back and watch it. It was called Fallen Forward, the woman that I have become. And she tells her story. And, you know, one thing that Mark and I have in common, we believe that the face behind the encounters, the story of the people are really important, because, you know, it's kind of hard to criticize people when you see that they're human, like you are. And we all have things that go on in our lives. We all have our stories. And when you see the reality of someone and who they are as people, and you put a face to the story or the encounter, that it is really, hopefully it opens people's minds. And another thing that I really like is what Mark says pretty often. Mark says, you know, it's great to have an experience and to be able to tell your story in the Bigfoot community, but really it shouldn't consume your life, and it should be secondary to who you are as a human being. And Mark, now I'm going to hand it over to you, and we wanted to touch a little bit about how you grew up and go into a little bit of your life story and your YouTube. It'll be in the description. But do you agree with what I just said, or do you have anything you would like to add to it?
No, I agree pretty much. I agree with you. What you said, it's more about the people than it is about this subject of the Bigfoot, dogmen, or whatever, the UFOs. It's a lot more about us and the experiences we have as humans, from growing up to adulthood, and what it's going to be hard to beat Rebecca's interview. But what I'm saying is how we get molded over life, you know, and what it turns us into be. And I like for people to focus more on humans than on these, whatever these things are, you know, and become a family. I think our channel has gotten to that point, and I think people are starting to realize what I've been trying to do, and like what you're trying to do with the same thing, is get more into the human side of it instead of the creature side of it. You know, where we come from, what we deal with, and what's influenced us in our life. You know, so I'm glad to see that you're doing the same thing like we're trying to do, and I think there's some others out there trying to get into that too, and I hope they do, because that's what we need to learn about. So.
I completely agree with you. Now, have you been in Alabama? Now, before we go forward, I'll be on your show August the 23rd, the live version. You do yours live, and we'll be going into a little bit about my life. It's kind of boring, especially compared to Miss Becca's, but she's a champ. She is a superwoman, and with everything that she's carried on her shoulders, she always walks around with a smile and in a good way. And I tell people you can feed the good wolf or the bad wolf, and she feeds the good wolf.
That's right. Shows. She does. Yeah, she does. She does. She's a good lady, and very glad I met her years ago, and I'm glad we were able to stay together and get married. And it's been a good ride, a little bumpy at times, but I think everybody has a bumps in the road. If we learn from them bumps in the road and try to do better from them. And love her to death, and she backs me up just about on anything I want to do. If I say I want to do this or that, she's pretty much going to back me. So
It's called teamwork.
That's it. And I try to back her on most of her stuff. There's some stuff I'll raise question mark. Now wait a minute, but overall, I do.
She is someone that likes to do manual labor. She likes to work with her hands. She likes to create things and grow things.
Yes.
And I think that's perfect for you. Now let's dive into you a little bit.
Okay.
Were you born and raised in Alabama your whole life, or?
Yes, I was born here in Sylacauga, Alabama. I grew up here and have lived here all my life. I have not. In fact, I still live within 3 miles where I grew up. So I've lived in a little radius of where I grew up at. Sylacauga, it's a unique little town. Of course, it gets a lot of its fame from home of Jim Neighbors, or Gomer Pyle, as most people know it. Also, Patty Holiday is from right here in this same area. They played Flo, if everybody remembers Flo.
I love me some Flo. Kiss my grits.
That's it. In fact, my mother, one of my mother's sisters, were in the same grade with Patty Holiday and went to school together. And they said when she'd come back home to the little town of Chillersburg, which is just north of us, 4 miles from here, she act like she was regular people. She didn't act stuck up or nothing, and she'd go in the grocery store and everything. Jim Neighbors, I said, was the same way when he come back home to Sylacauga regular. He's just down to earth, with the people. But so there's two of our fames, and then of course, only place on earth that a lady was hit by a meteorite that's been recorded. That was in 1954, and she survived. And actually, that meteorite hit a house, an old farmhouse, 400 yards where I grew up. I could see that house from my house where I grew up. Of course, that house got hit by lightning.
Wow, you've got to be kidding me. Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
You guys wouldn't happen to be on the 33rd parallel, would you?
Oh, yeah, right. Runs right through the middle of here.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So, University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa has that in their museum, the original meteorite. It's about the size of a football. And every year, the little town that I'm a councilman in a little town that's outside of Sylacauga called Oak Grove, because that's actually where the meteorite hit the lady, was in the little town of Oak Grove. Back in, it was just a little farming community, and then it incorporated in the 1970s. But that house was 400 yards from my home. And then we have Gravity Hill in Oak Grove, which is another thing that a lot of people come here for. It's they say it's an optical illusion, but you can get here in this one spot, put your car in neutral, and it looks like it rolls uphill. State says it's optical illusion, but there's been surveyors go over there with their surveying equipment and say, no, it's not an optical illusion. It is actually uphill. So it's pretty cool. And
Mark, keep talking. There's a cat fight outside.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Keep talking. Just keep talking.
All right. But also, the other fame is the largest marble quarries in the world. They discovered marble here in the 1820s after the War of 1812. Andrew Jackson had a doctor with him, and they were seeing all the white rocks on top of the ground, and ended up later years coming here mining, and that's what it's really known for. They call it the Marble City. And so Silicaga's got some fame. The other thing would be, the bluebell factories here for the southeast. And so that's the cat fight that was happening.
Yeah, she's all puffed up and upset. Sometimes she bites off a little bit more than she can chew. So that's smart.
Yeah.
She's taken
Yeah,
out
she's
a
a
few
pretty cat.
We actually found her in the swamp. Somebody tossed her off a bridge, and we heard her hit the water. But we thought it was a rock or something, and we just kept kayaking and taking pictures. And we ended up finding her on the bank, and she had a broke tailbone and a broke tail, and she was like that skinny, and she's had an attitude ever since. So I'm a little bit tolerant with her, but I do have the Swamp Kitty special. She can
But so that's a little bit about Silicaga. That's a little bit about Silicaga. I grew up in a family of my dad's family were farmers. One time dairy, then they switched over to cotton. Of course, as I grew up, we still farmed a little bit, not like as big as they did at one time, but we were still growing like corn and watermelons, cantaloupes, that type. More what you call truck farming. And we done that. And in fact, when I got grown, I kind of took it over, kept growing, 5, 6, 7, 10 acres of watermelons, cantaloupes, corn patches, and cutting hay. We had cows off and on. And of course, I had a friend that was real huge into farming, so I spent a lot of time with him. But I was real fortunate growing up. I had very good mother and father, very good aunts and uncles on both sides, cousins. Had a very good church family. Very fortunate. The Lord, gave me that. A lot of people don't have that, that fortunate to have that, but I did. And it kind of steered me staying in that direction of being close with family, farming. It's just in my blood. When spring comes, I want to tear ground up. I just want to, be on a tractor, or like me and my friends used to do. We used to do it with horses. We used to have times we would just, some of my friends kept mules and, draft horses, and we would get together and just plow with horses and stuff, going back to like our ancestors did. So, but went to school, high school, played baseball, football. Of course, always been in hunting, fishing. Ever since I was growing up, my dad was an avid bird hunter, for quail. So we always kept bird dogs. And one of my daddy's brothers was a big rabbit hunter, so he always kept beagles. So I grew up in a family that done a lot of small game hunting. And then as I got older, I took up deer hunting and got involved in coon hunting, which I loved it too. There's nothing to beat, a good pair of coon hounds, being out in the woods at night, So, and of course, we done a lot of fishing. When I was growing up, a lot of the river and creeks, you could still get to them. Down on the river, they had little campgrounds. They're just primitive. And we used to do a lot of, go down on the weekends, put out trot lines or set hooks. And in fact, some of it was on my grandpa's land that we done that. It wasn't his land at the time. He had done sold it. But we kept going back to this property, and we would camp out a lot on it. Now it's full of $1 million homes on it. But, we used to have good times, running the trot lines, to set hooks and just all that type of lifestyle. It was revolved around farming and hunting and fishing and stuff.
Let me ask you this. and I still read this book to this day. I've probably read it as much as I've watched Last of the Dogmen, and that's a lot. Wilson Rawls authored Where the Red Fern Grows.
Oh,
Have
yes.
you read it? Little Ann and Old Dan.
Oh, yeah. Very good
That
book.
every kid should read that book.
Yes, they should. And that book really shows you a lot of the Southern lifestyle from back in that time, how everything, like things were. And, a lot of people in other parts of the country, I'm not knocking them by no means, but they just don't realize I guess our heritage here in the South, what we really, a lot of us went through, or our ancestors went through to survive and to make it, surviving off these red dirt fields and, these old hills and stuff they lived on. So it's hard to believe they made a living off that or survived off that.
I remember a part in that book, and once again, it was Where the Red Fern Grows, authored by Wilson Rawls, where he went to town to buy his dogs, and he never saw his reflection before until he walked past the window, a storefront, and he seen his reflection. That was the first time he ever seen himself.
Right.
And
yeah.
I mean, that to me, that was a really good quality of life. I know when I was in school, if you lived on a farm or worked a farm, you didn't have to come till later on in the day. And you also got credit if you had to leave early and work the farm. Was that the same way with you guys?
That would have been with my family, my ancestors. I was born in 1968. So my family had done kind of got more modern, and the schools had got more modern. But that would have been more in even my sister didn't have to do that. She's 11 years older than me, so she got to go to school full time. But I think right before that time is about the kind of time some of that started doing away with. The farming in our part of Alabama really started leaving here probably in the 80s when they found out that they could grow pine trees real well here. And that's when a lot of the paper companies come in. So a lot of people started converting their farmland back into timberland. And they found out, they could 20 years, gather that timber and, make so, and,
Yeah.
But you go into what you said about when he seen his reflection. My dad's oldest brother, and my dad was almost 50 when I was born, so that tells you a lot. So my dad's oldest brother was born in 1911. And he told me, and I used to go hang out a lot with him because him and my dad farmed together for a while, even when some of the other brothers quit and stuff and went to working in what we call public jobs. He told me when he seen his first airplane, said it scared him half to death when it flew over. Remember seeing his first car come down the road. Remember when electricity came. And he said just old single light bulb in the ceiling. Remember when the telephone came about. He started off the life of horses and mules and wagons. And then I had a great aunt that lived she was born in 1890. And I actually got to visit with her son when I was younger because we'd go over on her property bird hunting. If we go over there, we would have to go a couple of hours before we was going to hunt because we was going to have to visit and eat. She wouldn't have let you out of the house if you wouldn't eat. And she still wore the old bonnet like they did way back in the long dress to your ankles. And she kept her hair in a bun. And she still cooked on the wood stove some. Even though she had a modern stove in the house that her son had put in there for her. And Lord, he was pretty old in himself. And her grandkids were older than me. But, she would tell me about growing up during that time period. You know, when she seen her first plane, when she first took her first train ride, or, you know, seeing, you know, her first TV. I mean, this is a lady born in 1890. She didn't, you know, the TV started coming out and she finally seen that. So, you know, that's pretty neat, you know, to hear them stories from the real people.
My grandmother tended garden until, I mean, she was in her 70s out there, and she was still tending to a garden big enough to feed the community. And unfortunately, the area was not that great of an area. And she was out there 73 years old and got shot in the arm with a 22, never gardened again. And she died shortly after that. And I always said it's because somebody took what she loved away from her. And I feel like if she would have stayed active and she had not been so frightened to go back in that garden, I think she would have lived many, many more years.
Probably would have, yeah. A lot of the older people, when their freedoms start getting took away from them, they do not last long.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Excuse me. I'm so sorry that she is a show crasher.
I'm surprised sister ain't done got up here in the picture with us.
I'm thinking sister is better behaved because Swamp Kitty walks all over Mama. Then anyway, the thing that I really look, you know, the reflection on the life and the way we grew up. Every Sunday you were at the church, you still, you know, had your Easter dresses and you had your Easter egg hunt. When a tragedy happened in the community, the whole community was there for the family. When tobacco was being harvested, everybody was at the farm and they were all working and they were all, you know, and there was a sense of a community. And I miss that. You really don't see that a lot anymore. So I think we had the golden years of we were
kind of the last of them.
Yeah, the blessed generation.
Yeah, I remember we would. I grew up in a Methodist church, and it was right up the road from our house. It was established in 1878 as a log building. And later on, another church was built, and then it caught on fire because it was made out of heart pine. It got hit by lightning because it set up on a hill, so it was a lightning magnet. And then they come back, built a brick church. But that was a big part of our life. Back then, we had Wednesday night service, Sunday morning service, and Sunday evening. Once a month, we had a fellowship supper at church in the basement on Saturday nights. After we had fellowship supper, we'd play ping pong, or people, the older folks sit around and talk. And I really missed that. That was very enjoyable. And then we'd have dinner on the grounds during the warm weather out behind the church. They used to have big tables built behind the church. And we would have, during the summer, once a month, we'd have outdoor like they did way back yonder, And of course, we had revivals. We had a homecoming. And I remember our church, would be packed because everybody would come back to that church,
Tent revivals.
Oh, yeah. They used to have weekly revivals. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of Sundays after church, we would go visit kin people. One Sunday, we'd go see my mother's people. And then the next Sunday, we'd go see my father's people. And that was a regular routine growing up. We were at somebody's kin people's houses on Sunday. And then sometimes on Saturdays to help with different things, and if they had some kind of project going on, or working in the garden, or they needed little help with whatever it could be, we went and helped. And then a lot of Saturdays they would come to our house and help us.
Two things I really miss: Sunday dinner after church. And
Yes.
you would have a spread. I mean, you would have the homemade biscuits, field peas straight out the garden, cucumbers straight out the garden on the table, fresh cut tomatoes. You wouldn't just have like two sides. There would be like a buffet for Sunday dinner, and it would be fried chickens or fried pork chops, homemade cream potatoes, or mashed potatoes, as some people say. But what I really miss is seeing the kids in the community. They would play football. They'd be out there playing football, and it was just a different culture, and you had a sense of community.
Yeah.
And I miss the Sunday watching them play football and that big spread. And look, my mama used to cook the best collards. You want to talk about some good cooking, Mark? And when she would make that thin cornbread, and I take mine and I'll chop onions up in it, and I'll just make and I'll stack the collards on it like a cheeseburger. I'll make a sandwich out of two collard greens and two pieces of flat cornbread. And those were good days. And every Sunday, Walt Disney would come on.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, usually on Sunday night be some kind of Walt Disney movie.
Wild Kingdom.
And also they'd have the regular movies. That's like when the James Bond movies, and of course on Saturdays we got up and watched the cartoons.
Good cartoons.
Good cartoons. Tom and Jerry and Bugs Bunny and
the
old Super Friends and Scooby Doo and the good ones. And then a lot of times on Saturday we had a channel and have all the old westerns on. So it'd be John Wayne and all Jimmy Stewart, all the good actors from that time period. And of course I'm a big John Wayne fan because my daddy favors him. If you look at John Wayne, you can see my daddy. I mean, they both, even though John Wayne was a lot older, I mean, they were the same built, stocky, tall, same almost talk, except my daddy was more Southern talk. And a lot of people used to tell me, man, your daddy does look like John Wayne. So,
the Duke. Now I tell you who I love. Now, to me, the best actor ever was Tom Berenger, but that's just me. But Jimmy Stewart. I love Jimmy Stewart. Loved him. And every Christmas I would watch It's a Wonderful Life, the black and white version, not the color version. It's a Wonderful Life. Loved it. And I miss those traditions.
Yeah, I do too. There was a lot of good actors from that time period. And I hate to say it, most stuff now is just
trash, brainwashing trash.
That's it. Brainwashing trash.
When you grow up and your cartoons have violence, they weren't Looney Tunes like we watched. We had Bugs Bunny and Willie Coyote, and mind you, Willie Coyote got the short end of the stick, and Elmer Fudd ran around with his gun trying to kill the rabbit. But it was good. I mean, you had the bulldog that was tied up on the chain, kissing the kitten, and you remember the big bulldog and the rooster.
Yeah, foghorn leghorn.
Yes.
Old foghorn. Talk like a Southern.
Yeah, that big old bulldog go up to that kid and is like, and that kid was like, meow, meow, and he kissed the kid, and he just like, and you'd have Pepe Le Pew with the little hearts going around the cat's head. But when you grow up now, even the cartoons have violence in it.
Yeah.
The music has violence in it. Everybody has conflict and they argue. And the whole culture that we know of now, the movies we watch, the the cartoons that we see our kids in front of, the even the memes, it's all about violence and fighting. People make more money over having a conflict program with drama mamas and big old lips with their little Botox stuff, having no values, spending thousands of dollars in the store, and the kid grows up and they think they can do it, or they're riding around shooting each other, and it's programming. I'm sorry, I'll go down that rabbit hole. We were the last really generation that had a chance.
Yeah, yeah. I have no regrets about growing up. I grew up in a good, stable home in a good town that didn't hardly have crime. Everybody got along. I mean, if you got in a fight, it was usually just a good fist fight, and then usually became good buddies after the fist fight, And
Yeah.
usually that was over a girl or something stupid,
Yep.
And usually the fight was
Flags.
over with, and that was it, Now you can't even argue with nobody because you don't know what they're going to do,
Houses were built with front porches and they had flags.
Right.
It's like almost now houses have no front porch. And it's like, is that by design? I mean, just because everybody's on games, they're on their games or their phones. Do we?
I believe that's by design.
Yes, sir.
I believe it's by design. This house here we bought now, it was built in the 70s. And it doesn't have much of a front porch. And I told Rebecca, I said, pretty soon we're going to build a front porch on this place. Now, we do sit out back a lot because we have a pavilion out there. And it's probably nicer to sit out there because we're looking at the ponds. We've got the woods behind our house. But I still miss that front porch because where I grew up, we had a front porch. And that's where we sit and shell peas, snap butter, beans, shell butter beans. And when our kinfolks or neighbors, and I remember when I grew up, I knew every one of my neighbors. And all of them were like mom and daddies too. Because if I done something, guess who also knew about it? My mom and daddy would know about it pretty quick. So they were like mom and daddies too. And I knew everybody in the whole area, and they knew who I was. Because I got, mom and daddy got some phone calls every now and then say, hey, Mark's acting up, getting into something he ain't supposed to. So, I get home and mama say, I heard you down there at so-and-so's doing that. So, okay, But not here where we live now. I know my neighbors right here by me, but everybody else, I don't know who they are. And, it's sad because, when I was growing up, I knew people several miles that way, whatever which way, I knew who they were. We either went to church with them or they'd been living there for years and, knew them. And now you don't know who your neighbors are no more.
Absolutely.
A lot of people don't realize what we have lost in the last 20 years. Because I'm going to say in the 90s when it really started changing, in the 90s.
Yes, sir. I'll save that for when I'm on your show, but
that's fine.
We went from a culture where our parents' word or our parents' decisions were solid and you didn't question it, to a generation that, the kids stand in the kitchen and, cuss their parents out. Because, when I was a cop, and this was the 90s, no, this was the early 2000s. I responded to a call one night where the single mother, just didn't have the money to give her kid to go to the movies with his friends. She went to sleep and he stabbed her to death. And that was when we started getting computers, is when the values changed. and
Yes.
and it was like a slow drip.
Yeah, I agree. It's just like at work now. When we go on a break, I remember used to when other places I've worked in my life, we look forward to break because we was all going to sit to talk to each other. Now, at
Yeah.
break times, everybody's in their phone, and I mean, I'm guilty of it too. A lot of times, I can't say I'm not. I've tried to get myself now. I've been trying to discipline myself better. When I do go to break, I don't bring that phone out. I start trying to engage people, and I've noticed some nights that I can get folks to start engaging, you know, and we'll sit there and talk. Sometimes through our break time and a little more, but I'm in maintenance, so I kind of got that little freedom there. Sometimes we're
Yeah.
not always having to stand looking at something, but so I try to engage people because I like to know who I'm working with a little bit about it. I mean, I ain't trying to know every little secret they got or nothing. I'm just wanting to
Yeah.
know them as a human and who I'm talking to. How many kids they got. How they think about things a little bit. And sometimes we get in some very good discussions, and and I'm gonna say this: a lot of the generation now, a lot of them have good morals. They just don't know how to use it. They haven't been pushed to use it. And I mean, a lot of them's got good level heads. They just
The potential.
they're sucked into this new world order, I call it. But so
Yeah.
I hate to say that. I hope I don't hurt your channel. I hate to
You
say
know what? It's the truth. Listen,
that.
you know what? I have a backup on Rumble. So if they ever boot me off of YouTube, you can go see me on Rumble, or you can find
Well,
me
I
on.
try to be careful on other people's shows and not bring up something that stirs up a hornet's nest too
Yeah,
much.
but it's the truth, and it's like I'm gonna tell you, I don't want to go to digital currency because I don't want Big G telling me that I've bought too much stupid stuff
Stuff.
from a G for a month.
I know.
I just you control people's money, you control their families, you control what they can get for their kids, you control their life, you control their vote, you control their freedom. No.
Yeah. And I really hate it for my kids. Uh, they're not getting to enjoy what I did growing up. The
Mud between the toes.
the way things were, it kind of makes me sad, and especially with the other generation of kids, I'm really watching it. Um, I work with a lot of guys that's in their 20s and 30s, and I bring up stuff, and they look at me like, "What are you talking about?" And I have to explain what I'm talking about.
Phone
They said,
booth.
"Huh?
Phone booth.
Yeah, yeah, yep." Or we used to have to go across the river to make long distance calls. So I mean, or the old party lines. See, now I remember the party lines. I remember picking up, and you would
Yes,
have
you would
to hang it back down.
have. And when we say party lines, for those that don't know, you would get on your phone and this phone would be attached to the wall, and you would have this really super long cord so that you could walk outside or around the house, and you would have to, was it zero you would dial to get a party line,
Yeah.
or would you have to? Yeah, I thought Star 69 was pretty cool when it come out.
Well, see, so many neighbors in the neighborhood would be on that party line. So a lot of times when you picked it up, somebody'd be already on the phone, so you'd have to hang it up. You'd wait a little while, pick it up, and if it was clear, then you could do the zero and call who you wanted to. So, uh, but I was real young when that was going on, and I think they finally, of course, we had Bell South here in Alabama, and they started,
Other bill.
getting to the point with the fiber optics where they could do the individual lines to each house.
Mhm.
But I do remember, and I still had some aunt and uncles that lived way, way out in the country. It was a long time before they got their own individual phone. They were still on party lines. So
I know I think it was like my great aunt. We would go see her and she still had an outhouse. And it didn't bother me to use the outhouse what bothered me is the rattlesnakes and the copperheads could crawl in it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I did not. I'm like, no, Mama, don't make me go out there. It's got snakes around it. But those were good times. I mean, those were truly good times.
They were, and that's. I even had some kin folks that still had the wells that you lowered the bucket down in and got you water. And you talking about some of the best water. And I don't know what it is about a dipper cup. I ain't never. They'd have the gourds. You've probably seen them. I know there in North Carolina, y'all probably had those dipper gourds, and that was still real. When I was growing up, a lot of the old timers, they still had them hanging on their walls. They'd have 4 or 5, but that was, go to my aunt and uncle's house, and we'd roll the water up the bucket, sit there and take that dipper gourd and just drink water. And I don't know what it was about that, but that's the best water that I can remember. And of course, later on, everybody started converting and having pumps put in their wells. But I always enjoyed that, going to one of my aunt and uncle's house. And when they built their back porch, they built the porch around the well. So over here on the corner of the house, they had it built up again. So the porch was under, the well was under the porch. And you could sit right there around the well on the porch, because that's where they done all their shelling peas. And you get ready for a drink of water, you just go lower the bucket and get the water. And, you can sit there and drink water. And I don't even know anybody hardly uses a dipping bucket anymore. I not my neck of the woods anymore, that I know of.
Yeah. I remember Miss Molly, which was our neighbor. We would pick those wild blackberries.
Oh, yeah.
And she would always make us a pie. We'd pick them straight off the bush, take them to her house, and she still did the classics, sitting in front of the window, and the crust would be perfect. And literally, she would use like sugar or whatever else, and she would make a pie for us. That's what the best.
Oh, yeah. You can't beat them.
RC colas and moon pies.
There you go. RC cola don't taste like it used to.
No soft drinks taste like they got that nanoparticles now that's giving people cancer. And it's got that in them now. So, so there we go down the rabbit hole again.
Well, I think me and you think a lot alike, too. I can already tell. So, one thing I do remember that was that I enjoyed, we had a lady in our church. She was an older lady. And she lived in a house that was built like in 1870, 1880. And she had an apple orchard in her backyard. And when I was about 13 or 14, maybe 12, somewhere in there, her husband had done passed away. She had one son and one daughter. Her son lived out in front of her in another house, and her daughter lived off, I think. Yeah, she lived off. But she would get me to come over on Saturdays and pick them apples for her when they got ready. And she had about 20 trees, so it took me a while. And but what she would do, she'd have me a bunch of those old apple pies ready, the old ones that fold. You talking about good. I mean, and then she would bake some while I'd be out there picking apples. And then she would bring them to church on them suppers. We had them fellowship suppers we'd have, or those Sundays after church dinner on the grounds. And I mean, she would bring a tray probably with 100 of them. And of course, when everybody ate, she would make sure everybody carried some home,
And that was from scratch. That weren't that store-bought dough stuff. That was rolled out on the counter.
Right. Yeah, they were. You couldn't beat them. I cannot find none yet that beat them. I've ate a lot of the fold ones. There's some people getting close.
They were made with lard.
Yes, they were made with lard. You can't hardly buy lard much anymore.
I remember we always would have fish fries and everybody would conveniently show up when we started frying the fish. But yeah, I mean,
Oh
you
yeah.
could go down to the Lumber River and catch your, literally eat out the river, and
Oh yeah.
can't do that now.
Now the rivers, Rebecca's mouse. There it is. This mouse. Let me set this over here out of the way for it, because she on our shows. I don't know if you've noticed. Sometimes she'll have that thing in her hand and we'll disappear for a minute. But I keep seeing that mouse mess. I got to find that thing. But yeah, we used to when I was growing up. We done a lot of crappie fishing at night on the river, and of course we done a lot of all kind of fishing. But we used to eat fish every Friday night growing up. My mom would cook fried fish, usually crappie, sometimes brim, sometimes catfish. And a lot of nights, my sister and brother-in-law would come. And sometimes mother and aunt and uncles would come, and they'd bring stuff. And, I mean, Mama would cook big platters full of, fried crappie, hush puppies. Sometimes my aunt would bring the big pot of French fries. And she would buy, slaw and the baked beans sometimes. My aunt would actually buy potatoes and cut them up like French fries, and that's how she done them. So you talking about real good? They're a lot better than any French fry you'd ever buy out of the store.
We had a secret with ours. We would cut the potatoes like the shoestring French fries, only a little thicker, and we would roll them in flour and coat them really good, then fry them like that. They were and they had just this crunch on them, and yeah, it was good. Yeah. It weren't like fried chicken, but it had like a crispy. I can't explain it, but that's wow. We call them Dixie fries.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Kind of. Yeah.
They were good.
Yeah. I tell you, I'm gonna gain 20 pounds just talking about the
past. I do the carnivore, but I started talking about collards, and I'm like, oh God! Sometimes you just forget how country you are, man. And I was like,
yeah. That's the only reason that I can't do the pure carnivore is because I like sweet potatoes. I could tear up some sweet potatoes. I like fried okra, fried squash. I mean, you can't beat them.
It's hard.
It is hard. But now what I'm trying to do, I'm doing the fasting where 16 hours I don't eat nothing. And then at 8 hours I try to eat, but I try not to get wild with it. I try to eat me a few carbs, but I still try to stay mainly meat. But I'll, like I might give me something fried okra or some boiled squash or some boiled cabbage or the sweet potato. Because the sweet potato is a good carb. It's not as bad for you as the white potatoes.
Sweet potato.
So I'll eat a little bit of it, and I'll tell you, my aching in my knees and elbows have kind of quit. I'm starting to drop weight. I think I've lost now about over 15 pounds.
That's awesome.
But so I'm noticing that the fasting is working, the way I'm doing it. So if I can just stay on track,
Fasting is really good. Now, when I do very strict carnivore, I broke 32 bones at one time. But in my whole career, I broke 40 something. So I deal with pain daily. And I literally refuse to take anything stronger than ibuprofen. No. I woke up pain-free after doing it like 3 weeks, really strict carnivore. And I'm like, it was the first time since 2007 I hadn't felt any pain. And you know what? I fell off the wagon and I ate me some fried pork chops. And it went down. It went downhill after that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you know, I love your values and the way you embrace your friends. And I remember the first time we were touching base with each other because Pat and Joe put us in touch with each other
Right.
because they thought we had kind of the same values. I remember the first time, and I talked about this on Miss Becca's show. I remember the first time we spoke about Becca, Miss Becca. I hate to call her Miss Becca because I feel like I'm talking to an elder. She's my age. You said the first time you seen her, she walked through the plant, and you said, "That is a beautiful woman." And your friend said she's married.
Yep.
And as luck would have it, you both got on the same dating site and you found each other.
Right. Sure did. I had been working there at that plant for a while, and had went through a divorce previously, and then had changed jobs. I had went to this plant, left my old job, came to a new, and been there for a while, and really wasn't thinking about dating again right at that moment. For some reason, it just really wasn't crossing my mind. And one day, I happened to be on day shift because I was working swing shift in all three shifts, and her team happened to be on day shift that week, and I noticed her. I walked by, and I kind of, that's a nice looking woman, and just something drawed her to me, And I asked a couple of other guys, I said, who is she? And they said, well, they told me her name, but said that, he said, I think she's married. I said, oh, okay. So I said, well, that's off limits, So, and so I didn't, for a little while, I didn't think much else about it. And one of the guys at work, he had been single for a while, and he told me, he said, y'all look at this dating site here. He said, it's a pretty decent dating site, And I went in and I put a little search, so many miles radius, and kind of put the criteria I was looking for. Of course, I wanted somebody that was kind of country like, that was into hunting, fishing, maybe, or could take that type of lifestyle, and farming and all that. Well, it kind of narrowed it down pretty quick for me. Come to find out, ain't many in there like it. But so that narrowed that search way down, and well, her profile popped up. I looked. So that's that girl at work, or lady at work. I shouldn't say girl, but I said, that's that lady at work. And I sit there, and it says she's single, and I looked at the little date. It kind of tells you, when they put in, and if they're still active, and it showed she was still very active. I said, well, she ain't married if she's on a dating site like that. So, or I didn't think she was. So I decided to send her a little message, and she answered back. She said, no, I'm not married. And I told her, I said, well, I work the same plant with you. She said, well, I don't do much of this online stuff. She said, you're going to have to come visit. She didn't really want to go back and forth online. So I said, well, I'll come visit you one day on your break time, because they had a set break time. I didn't want to go over while she's doing her job, because they kind of frown on that if we go to messing with folks, because I'm in maintenance, and they want us around, but they don't want us
Congregate.
Right. So I said, I'll come visit you on one of your breaks. That way you see who I am, what I look like, whatever, So I used up, at break time. I knew what time they went to break, and I slid up the break room there, or the little break area, introduced myself, and we went to talking. And I told, they ended their break, come up, and I left, and I said, well, she may not want to fool with me no more, but we started talking more and more, and that's how it got started. And so I think sometimes I was meant to be there at that certain time. And in fact, she was fixing to move back to Georgia, so I made my move at the correct time. I believe if I'd waited a little longer, it wouldn't have happened. So I think I was pushed a little bit on that one. So, I think sometimes the Lord has a lot of ways of putting people together that need to be together, I guess you would say. Some people, I think, are made to put together to help one another through life, and what we've experienced. And I think he sent her as my mate, So,
The thing is, I think you're very lucky to experience that in life, and I think you two are made for each other.
yeah, I do. I know excuse me, sometimes I can be a little contrary and stuff, and she knows how to handle it, So, we all have our little perks and, downsides to us, and she knows how to handle both sides of it real well.
So at what point, when you're going on with your life and you really had a good solid life with you had some really good solid times and you were smart enough to enjoy them, at what point did Bigfoot come into the picture?
Well, how I got involved with Bigfoot, of course, growing up, I'd seen some of the shows and stuff like In Search Of, and some of those different type stuff. But in 2007, me and two of my friends decided to go down into Lowndes County, Alabama, which is near Selma on the Alabama River, and to go hunting away from our normal hunting club that we belong to. And we went down on this management area that used to be owned by Lady Bird, Lyndon Johnson's wife. That's where her family owned about 20,000 acres on the Alabama River. In fact, I think she grew up down there before she moved to Texas. But their family sold the property to the state of Alabama, and they made a management area. And me and my two friends went in there hunting that day. And that afternoon, we went to a different part of the management area to hunt. And we were on a big green field that was big enough for all three of us to sit on, and we all seated parallel to each other. We would be shooting at each other. And that evening, a little after 4 o'clock, started hearing racket behind me. I had two does come out in the field, be feeding. They seemed relaxed. They every now and then they turn their head, look back in toward the swamp. There's a big swamp in behind me. And I'm not going into big details on this because it'd eat up a lot of time. I started hearing some racket behind me. I thought it was a buck deer coming because it was during rut. So I'm thinking in my head, I got a buck easing up. He's probably after two of them does, one of those does. One of them may be in heat or whatever. Because I noticed they would raise their head up and they'd look, but their tails wasn't showing like anything's going on. It showed normal. Well, I kept hearing this racket easing around. And about that time, those two does throwed their tails straight up. They blowed and they took off across that field the opposite way. And I'm going like, well, But I could still hear this racket a little bit. And I said, well, maybe both of them, they babies. Oh, that's all right. Don't worry about that. But
I wasn't hurting her. She's just a drama mama.
Ain't nothing wrong with that. That's what I'm saying. I'm surprised sister ain't been here already. I guess Rebecca's got her occupied right now. But I kept hearing this racket. I knew the deer left for some reason. But this racket finally started getting in kind of behind me. And I was sitting up against a big white oak tree. It was an ancient oak tree. I was sitting in front of it. And I finally, the curiosity got the best of me. So I slid up that tree, using it still for cover, and kind of just peeked my head out from around the tree looking behind me. Well, I didn't see nothing for a minute. Couldn't see anything. Well, about that time, I noticed maybe 60, 70 feet from me behind the tree, I seen a head pop out, then go back in. And I'm like, wait a minute. Somebody done snuck up in here behind me. Well, they'd pop out and look at me again. It done pegged me. It knew exactly where I was at. It done pegged me. You know, I'd see it pop out, look, pop its head back. And then I'd see a shoulder sometimes of it. Well, one thing caught me off guard. It didn't have no hunter's orange on. So I kept looking, and we kept playing this peekaboo for a minute. In my head, I'm still not thinking Bigfoot or anything. I'm thinking a human has done snuck up on me. Well, I done something I shouldn't have. Usually I had a pair of binoculars with me. Well, that day I had left them in the truck. I did raise that rifle and look down at that scope to see what I was looking at, because I kept saying, this ain't acting like a normal human. That was in my brain. Well, when I did, of course, that scope brought it in what I was looking at. And when it popped its head back out, all I could see was this big puff of hair. I mean, I couldn't even hardly see the eyes. It was just a big puff of hair. And I could see the shoulder from right in here. And it was just a big hairy arm. And then I could see part of the leg sticking out, and it was a big hairy leg. And right then, I was like, what in the world am I looking at? Well, about that time, I don't know if me raising a gun at it, and it thought, uh-oh, he's fixing to shoot me. It hits on all fours and shoots out of there like a rocket. I'm talking, I ain't never seen nothing move that fast in my life. And I'm going like, what in the world did I just see? Well, fear had not entered into the equation yet, or what I say, but then it did. Fear hit me, because I said, what was that? What did I just witness? Of course, it's getting right at dark in. I was a good 3/4 mile from the truck. Even though I knew my other buddies were back up the green field a little ways, I said, I better get my tail of the truck, because I just don't know what this was. And of course, I come out, start walking up the field. I get about halfway, and I knew my buddy should be right in there, and I hollered out his name. He answered me. He come out, and I said, hey, you see anybody or anything? He said, no. He said, it's just been dead quiet in here. I said, well, he said, I ain't even seen a deer, a bird, or nothing. I said, well, I seen 2 deer, but 2 does. Well, we're going up. I didn't say nothing to him about anything else. We get up to the truck. My other buddies already made it to the truck. We walk up, and I've been there maybe a minute. He looks at me. He said, Mark, what's wrong with you? I said, what do you mean what's wrong? He said, you ain't acting right. You fellas, you look like a ghost. And the other one looked at me. He said, well, he does, don't he? He said, you all right? I said, well, I seen something down there in the woods. I said, I thought it was somebody, but I don't think it was somebody. I think it was something else. And he kind of looked at me funny. He said, okay. Well, we got in the truck, and I didn't say nothing coming on back home. We were about 80 miles from home. Well, the next day, he calls me. The one that asked me at the truck, he said, you seen a Bigfoot, didn't you? I said, yeah, I think I did. Or, he said, well, don't worry. I've done seen them before, too. And I said, oh, wow. I said, you have? He said, yeah, right behind the house. I said, on our hunting club? He said, yeah, when I was growing up. He said, my grandma and grandpa talked about them all the time. I said, okay. So that's when I got in on the internet. That was 2007, January 2007. I really started searching. I put in Bigfoot in Alabama, and Lord have mercy, there was stuff come up everywhere. And but I found a guy in Alabama that seemed like had a real good website. So I sent him an email, he's passed away now, but he was the late Mike Mullane. He used to have the AlabamaBigfoot.com. He was well known here in Alabama and Mississippi and Florida and everything during that time period. He asked me, could he call me on the phone? So we ended up talking on the phone. And before I knew it, he had his other buddy, Mr. Tal Banco, or known as Bill White from Arkansas. A lot of folks used to know him in the Bigfoot world. He contacted me. And he's actually the one that really took my report. And later on, I would become a researcher for him, or investigator, whatever you want to call it, for this part of Alabama. So that's kind of how I got into the Bigfoot, because I witnessed one. And then through them, started working this part of Alabama. Found out I had a group of them on our hunt club, what we call Creepy Mountain, which is 2.5 miles from me right now. Then I found out Talladega National Forest was full of them. Found out other property owners had them on their property, and that's how I got started in this. You're muted.
Most people would celebrate that, sir.
Oh no, I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. Do you think that it was watching you hunt those deers because it wanted an easy dinner?
I think so. Either it was waiting on me, or it may have not knew I was there for a moment. And maybe it was trailing those deer. I don't know. But I think it was going to have an opportunity, maybe hoping in that I would kill one of them. Excuse me, I should say harvest. I know I'm incorrect, but and I think when them deer left, maybe it picked up my scent or something. I don't know, and then it started working behind me, trying to figure out where I was at. That's how I feel like what happened. It was trying to get in behind me, maybe to either flush me, make me move, or it would see where I was at. And then, of course, when I did move, it picked me up real quick.
I don't care what anyone says. That's their home field. They have tactical advantage, and I think that comes naturally to them. And yes. I think you are correct. It was anticipating your moves, because humans are very predictable.
Right. Yeah, I think it done had me pegged, already. It just didn't know. It probably knew the general area I was sitting. It just probably couldn't see me. And I think, and that movement, I wonder a lot of times if it was doing those little subtle movements to draw me out, to make me move, to look at it. I feel that way,
But that would be like dangling a hook in front of a fish.
That's it.
Oh. Looking back before that, I mean, your world kind of changes a little bit when that happens. Swamp, if you don't fix and have to spray her, God help me. You're bad mama. I mean, she loves me, but it's love-hate. She, like, most of the time hates me. Looking back, I'm sorry. Okay. Looking back, I mean, your world changed. Yeah, it has a way of changing you, your perception. You realize you're not the big dog in the woods. Even with, a sidearm, whether it be just, a sidearm or a long gun, you feel really small and powerless. When you look back now, were there things that happened prior to that when you were out in the woods or on the farm that makes a lot of sense now?
Oh, yes. Especially the coon hunting, because being out there at night a lot and going to different properties, hearing vocals that I didn't understand, sometimes smelling things that were like, what in the world am I smelling? dogs that wouldn't hunt in certain areas. Sometimes you turn them out, they go 50 yards in the woods, turn, come right. I'm talking about trained coon dogs. I ain't talking about just a yard dog. I'm talking about something new, dogs that knew
I drive.
Right. And they would come back to the truck and went back in the box. And I'm going like, what? Because these dogs were the type, they'd go find a coon track. If they had to go 5 miles, they'd go find that tree. And I've had that happen before. But they come back ready to load up, go. And I'd be like, what in the world? So we load up and go down the road maybe a mile to another branch, turn loose, they'd hunt fine. And my buddies would say, well, something must have been up there, a bobcat, or I'm going like, my dogs ain't scared of bobcats. There's nothing I've ever seen them nervous about. One instance I remember real well, we were camping out one time. I was young, down on a place called Paint Creek in Coosa County. It's about 30 miles south of here. We went back in a very rural part of the creek to camp. It was my daddy, my mother, me and a cousin, and my uncle. Well, that night, me and my cousin and my uncle slept in the back of the truck. My mom and daddy slept in, they drove a car, and back, you could get a car in there. So they drove the car, and they slept in the car, and we slept in the back of the truck. Well, I remember during the middle of the night, waking up because there was something up in the tree above us, and limbs were just shaking everywhere. And I kind of bumped my uncle, and he was real hard of hearing. He was a POW in World War II. He lost his hearing. And he was in a German prison camp for most of the war. He got captured in North Africa. But here comes Sister to join us now. So,
hey, sister. Sister. Sister.
Yeah, but we were, I noticed all the limbs up the tree was just shaking violently, and I punched my uncle. Finally got his attention, and I said, "Something is here in the tree above us." He said, "Oh, it's probably a coon or something. I got up there just being nosy." He went on back to sleep, and this went on for another 10 or 15 minutes. I'm sitting here just watching the tree doing this sway, and there wasn't no wind. And finally it quit. And I finally just dozed back because I thought he was right. Yeah, a coon or something done got up there. But later on, I got thinking about that. I said, there wasn't no coon doing that. There's no way a coon was moving that whole tree. And I don't think it was no cat or nothing like that. I'm wondering now, because I found out later there were reports of Bigfoot from that area. I wonder if we had a young one up in that tree above us checking us out. I feel that way. And then later on, I would find out that he had actually witnessed Bigfoot himself, but he wouldn't talk about it. In fact, my dad was the one that let that cat out of the bag. And so you come to find out, my grandmother and one of my aunts had witnessed that walking. They had witnessed something go across one of the cotton fields one day. They were sitting on the back porch, and it was late in the evening, and they watched what they said looked like two gorillas go across the cotton patch one evening. And but my uncle had seen what he had seen outrunning a trot line one morning at daylight. He watched one walk up the bank of the river and turn and go into what we call summer huckleberries. Y'all probably have them up there too. It's a little short huckleberry. It grows on hillsides. A certain time of year, they're full of berries. They're about, about the size of a pea.
I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
He witnessed one come walking down the riverbank and turned, went up in there to a big summer huckleberry patch. And and that's one thing I noticed about him. When we always went to the woods trapping or hunting or whatever we did, he always carried a gun with him. And I always asked him, I said, why you got a gun with you? Because I knew it wasn't for snakes. Because, if we run across a cottonmouth or something.
Yeah. Well, you have little 22 snake charmers you can carry for that.
Yeah. But he tell me, he said, well, son, you just never know what you're going to run up on out here. And I wonder if that was what he was talking about. But I never did ask him that question before he passed away, so I don't know.
Have you ever? Well, this is Alabama. I mean, I'm from North Carolina, and like right on the river, we're like maybe a mile from the river. Um, we had a lot of moonshiners still when I was growing up, and we had a lot of bootleg little shacks on the river. Like you can go there and tell your wife you're going to the store, and 2 days later you're in the shack still drunk, by the river. I wonder what kind of tales those people, the moonshiners and the people on the river and the bootleggers had back in the day, because they had to see them.
Oh yeah, I've heard from some people who actually made whiskey that sometimes the boogers would come in there and get into their mash, get the corn out
Yeah, the mesh.
and stuff like that. My grandfather was a whiskey maker. In fact, that's how he lost his property in a certain amount of way.
Revenue.
They lived on the river. Yeah, he in fact he got one earlobe shot off by a river deer running from him. But
Those were the good old days, though, right?
right, but that's something we don't talk. My family don't talk a whole lot about my grandfather, but he was a whiskey maker, and my great grandfather.
I understand. We different because my people, we put that on the front porch and advertise it, but okay.
But I never did hear anything about my grandfather having them experiences, but I will say some of my friends in the past, even me, have played with that a little bit. So I'll leave it at that. But of course, we was doing it in a building, but I've heard of some of the other ones mention about they think it was Bigfoot getting into their stuff here and there. That's one thing I haven't really talked about with people a whole lot. I kind of shy away from that one just because, you know what I'm saying.
I understand that. I do want to say this, just for me, for whoever watches my shows, I always talked about the best moonshine, the blackberry moonshine I ever had, come from upstate New York. And as a Carolina girl, I was really embarrassed to say that. But my friend that used to be, he's from upstate New York and he moved to, North Carolina. He would always bring me some. I'm not much of a drinker at all, but it was the best, most smooth moonshine. And I always try to, keep some in the fridge. And I went long story short, I arrived to work last week and I sent him a text and his wife said, he had a really bad day because I was trying to get some paperwork done that, to get him squared away with his job. And told her, I said, let him know I'm praying for him and I'm sorry that, I didn't know he never told me he had cancer. And I always just really, we would cut the fool in the middle of, I work, low income area, and we would just cut the fool in the middle of the street, and everybody on the street would be like, always, hey Carl, hey Miss Victoria, and I got up the next day and went to work, and I told my supervisor, I said, we really need to do something really nice, or just giving you a heads up if he's, late on his work, this is what's going on. And he come back in. I got my car to go hit the road, and about 10 minutes later, my supervisor texted me, told me he had passed away that night. And I took that really hard. And when we started talking about moonshine, I thought about him. And it's probably not the right place to tell on your show, but for those that follow me, that they know that every time he would go back home, he'd always bring us some. And he passed. So good guy.
Very sorry. That's kind of, I lost my best friend last week. And that you bringing that up, that's something that me and him done a lot of. He I don't really need to say this on him. He made one of the prettiest steels I've ever seen in my life.
I, to me, I'm okay talking about it because it's the things we've done in life that shape us as people.
That's right.
And when I go on your show, you're going to learn what a really oddball and socially awkward person I am. It is really hard for me to even have a normal conversation because my brain don't work like other people's. But unfortunately, it's like I told Miss Becca, when you stop, things fall forward. They all fly in the front seats like slamming on brakes in life.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And unfortunately, that the things we do in life, whether they're frowned upon, and I'm Southern Baptist, but rather is frowned upon by people of our faith or what, those are still part of us as human beings, and they shape us into who we are and the way we think and the wisdom that we have as adults. And so I'm okay with my little, my grandma called me wild child from the day I was born till the day she died, I did everything I could, to live up to. Always the first girl in ISS. I always got the first paddling in school. But those are the things that shape us. But the things that was people considered mischievous when I was a child, that's what made me such a good law enforcement officer, because I related to people. I didn't care if you were a felon or the best, sit on the front pew at church. I would break bread with you and have a conversation with you. And that's just the way I live my life. But I'm sorry, I went on a rant.
Oh, that's right. I've got a cousin that was a deputy sheriff for years in this county. And in fact, I've had other deputies mention to him, they said, your cousin can just calm people down in just a minute. They said, he'll just go to talking to them. And he said, they'll just melt with him. He said, a lot of them, they'll just go ahead and ease their hands of, hey, man, go ahead and put me in the car, and talk with him all the way up there. I mean, he had that disposition. He just put people at ease. And I think one guy was giving him a hard time one time on a call or something. And he said, look, man, he said, let's just make this easy. He said, you're going to go to jail one way or another. He said, let's go peaceful. And you'll have a good conversation. Or he said, these other ones, they going to want to whoop up on you, if you go to acting up too much, And, he said, oh, boys, okay. So we got in the car, and a lot of deputies had told me that. They said he just, he can defuse the situation real quick, And in fact, he was over here today. He come by for a few minutes today, so he's retired now. But
Yeah, had I not been injured, last year I would have had my 30 years in law enforcement and had full benefits and been enjoying my life. I'd be hiking somewhere on a mountain right now. But I lost so many, whatever. So now deputies are law enforcement is another good source. Law enforcement, EMS that's on the road, they are another good source of seeing some really strange things. And some of the things, but on night shift, after a while you're like, okay, that was strange,
Right. He's seen some weird things, but he said, I'm gonna be honest with you, Mark, I never seen anything like a Bigfoot, but he's seen paranormal, what he thinks was paranormal. I asked him if he ever got a call on Bigfoot, and he said, well, I haven't, but he said some of the other deputies have. And then he let the cat out of me. He said, there's a few deputies seen stuff. He said, now, I don't know if they'll talk to you or not. One of them did talk to him. And now what's real funny, it's kind of weird, but one of my neighbors, I used to live on the south side of Creepy Mountain. I live kind of on the east side of it now. But the little neighborhood I lived in, we had a lady that was a county jailer. She worked as at the county jail, and she worked evening shift. And sometimes I'd run into her at the service station different times, and already knew the boogers were on the hunting club. Well, her property actually bordered the hunting club. You could come out of holler right into her backyard. And one day I happened to see her, and this lady was, I mean, she was a tough woman now. She wasn't scared of anything. And I asked her how she's doing and all that. She said, well, we got a peeping Tom in the neighborhood, and I'm going to catch him. And I looked and said, peeping Tom? She said, yeah. She said, we got a peeping Tom. I'll come in from work. Sometimes he'll be looking in the kitchen window at me. I said, by the time I got the door, he's gone. And she done told the deputies and all. They done made patrols through there and stuff. Well, I said, well, if it ever happens again, call me, And I said, I'll come up there and look around. Well, I didn't never hear nothing from her. And one day I happened to see her again. I think it was at the service station again. I asked her, I said, well, you had any more trouble with peeping Tom? She said, no, I ain't seen him in a while. I said, you mind if I come up one day and look around your place? She looked at me and she said, why? I said, I just like to look around if you don't care. She said, what are you looking for? I said, I want to look for tracks or something. She said, well, I done been out there. I ain't found. I said, well, let me come look. So I go up there. She had horses and everything. I did too, so that helped everything go. We talked about horse. I said, well, let me walk around to your kitchen a minute. And we walked around there, and I looked at her, and I said, if we got a peeping Tom, he's either running around with a ladder or he's about 8 or 9 foot tall. Her mouth dropped. She said, you're right. I ain't even thought about that. I said, okay. Well, I said, well, either he's got a ladder with him or he's putting a bucket here or he's 8 or 9 foot tall. Because when I walked up, the bottom of her windowsill of her kitchen was like right here, and I'm 6'1".
Wow.
And it's like it hit her like a ton of bricks. And I think she was having a booger visiting her at night right there.
They say they are attracted to certain women.
Yeah.
Or do you
well,
think
she was a country woman, and she was very athletic, very outdoorsy. I mean, she loved horses. She could shoot guns. She hunted,
Good
stuff
woman.
like it.
Good woman.
Oh yeah.
So how long did that activity continue? Do you know?
Way she talked, it happened 2 or 3 times, and then I think it just quit. I don't know why it quit. It'd been a while since when I went up to visit her place and walked around there. I think it'd been a month or 2 since she'd had a visitation. Now, of course, somebody shooting a gun. I kept hearing I thought somebody knocking at the door. I got some neighbors way over through the woods. He likes to shoot his gun after dark. I ain't never figured it out, but
I've got one I got to break in. I definitely have one I need to put about 300-400 rounds through. But go ahead.
But I think he's got him a fully automatic the way it sounds. But and he may be law enforcement. I think there is a guy back over yonder way about 2 miles from me that's law enforcement. So he may be out there practicing tonight or something. But I don't know. But usually right after dark, he'll let off some rounds about once a week. So.
You might be chasing a booger off, sir. It's kind of like marking your territory sometime. Let me ask you this. You call it Creepy Mountain. It's got its name for a reason. Have you ever looked into how it got its name?
Well, that's not the real name of the place. That's the name we gave it.
Okay.
Because we had another friend of ours that was researching with us, and he called it Creepy Mountain Investigations. When Finding Bigfoot came and visited that property in 2013, they asked us, they said, we can't use the real name of this place. So they asked, is there a name y'all would like to give it? Well, my friend, Adam, He said, well, let's just call it Creepy Mountain because the place is creepy. I mean, he wasn't kidding. It's a creepy place. But no, that's not the real name of the mountains.
Okay. Say
But
no more. Say no more. And the reason why is I had a friend with BFRO that he also did some work with Mr. Moneymaker, and he took him to Uwharrie National Forest, and they ruined that area after that episode come out.
yeah, I got a couple good friends there in North Carolina that used to go there some, but like they said, there's so many people there now. You may know them. They call themselves Dirty Squatching. Tim Deals and Dwight Campbell and
Now I've heard Dwight Campbell's name.
and Bob Trent.
Is he the one that got the picture of the dog man off his walking? He had the camera on his walking stick. Was good picture from what I hear. Really good picture. Always walks with his dog. Got it going right. I mean, caught like the they said it's one of the best pictures you'll ever see of one.
I'm not sure about the dog man. I know Bob got a very good thermal of one at Uwharrie. He got a very good thermal there. Their main area is over in western North Carolina in the mountains where Tim Deals live. He lives over in
South Mountain.
Is it Franklin?
Yeah, Franklin.
Yes, yes, right above Georgia, because they go right into North Georgia a little bit too. Mm-hmm. But I've been actually on outings with them here in Alabama. They used to come here pretty regular. In fact, where we're going to have the camp meet and greet next in October. Bob and Tim has both been there, and they've invited me up to their area, and I'm going to take them up one day. I'm going to come up in that neck of the woods.
So, is that the one with the Woodwalker and them's having?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to make sure. I can't go, but I'm definitely going to make sure I donate a little. I'm saying it on record. Donate a little money to help them out with that because really good people.
Yeah, really they are. Yeah, they're good people. It'll be us, Cedar Creek Bottoms, and then Woodwalkers, then Beast TV, which is Martin Ubel, him and Larry Porch, and then Squatch and Holler, which is Roger Williams out of Tennessee. We're kind of I guess you call it the host of it. So this time they're coming to my area, it's part of Alabama. We'll be in Talladega National Forest, 12 miles from Creepy Mountains. That's how close it is. So it'd be a very good meet and greet.
Have you had aggressive encounters with them? I remember the story about the missing hunter or the hunter that was torn apart. I don't know if you want to talk about that, but that's always
what I can. That was supposed to happen in the 80s at where we're going to have the meet and greet. This come from another researcher, how I come about it. I was kind of the one that turned him on to that area because I knew boogers were in that area because of Mr. Bill White. Mr. Bill White used to go to some private property that was 4 miles away, and I had been on that property that was full of boogers that were giving them people who lived on that property little issues. And they're still there. They hadn't went nowhere. I knew that they were coming up in there in that area because of some of the reports and stuff, but I did not know about this guy that got. There he goes again. He is unloading it over there. But
good times.
Yeah. But anyway, another researcher friend of mine really started working the Talladega National Forest. I mean, from the top of it to the bottom, which that thing is 90 miles long. That's how long the Talladega National Forest is. In fact, it's two parts of it. One part's in eastern Alabama, one part of it's in western Alabama. But it's around 90 miles long. It's about 20 miles wide, most of it. And it's all it is mostly a mountain. It's the last part of the Appalachians. where they end. And on each side of it is national forest. And he really started working that area. Well, one day he called me. He said, man, he befriended a lot of the forest rangers and the game wardens. He said, man, I found out something that's wild. And he said, I want to, he's already told me about it. Later on, I would meet up with him one day, and he would show me official paper that he says was official paper from, I guess, the coroner's report. But what we found out about it was a guy was in there hunting. He didn't show up at home. His family ended up calling law enforcement. At the time, that county, I think, also informed the game warden because it was on a management area that they had a possible person missing. His brother comes with them, meets him there because he knew where he was hunting at. And they walk up in the woods. They find him at a base of a tree stand 10 foot away with his rifle laying beside him. They said one arm was torn off. His body was in like somebody would wring out a wash rag. He was twisted, just like me and you would take a wash rag full of water and wring it. They said he was twisted. And one leg was broken backwards. In other words, like something grabbed it and pulled it backwards. There was no bites on him or anything, but heavy bruising. His rifle had not been discharged. It was still loaded, and they determined that no round had been fired out of it. The other researcher feels like something probably as soon as he got out of the tree, met him at the tree and got a hold of it. The coroner's report that I looked at, if it was an official report, and I say that because I can't prove it was the real report. All I can say is I held something that looked like an official report. Said death, unknown animal. Some of the locals in that area, I have talked to them. There's one guy in that area that frequents that campground a lot. When you go in there to camp, he's going to stop and visit and talk with you. Real, very, very nice man. I asked him, I said, do you remember something about a hunter being found here dead back in the 80s? He said, yes, I do. I said, well, what did you hear was cause of death? He said, well, I heard he had a heart attack. I said, well, who'd you hear that from? He said, well, some of the old game wardens that used to be over this place. I said, okay. I said, about anybody else being found down in here? He said, oh, yeah. He said, they found more dead people around here. He said, they ruled it like drug overdose or different. That's okay. I said, well, you come up in this campground a lot. And at the time, we had found one of the outings we had found an abandoned tent. At this out, we all come in there to camp for, that weekend. There was a tent way off down on one end of the campground by itself. And we noticed all the stuff was still there. Cooler, table. I mean, you could tell somebody still set up camp. Well, nobody came back to that camp that night. Next day, we decided we better walk down there and look around because that was kind of odd to see all the stuff. Well, we get down there, and we noticed that everything's still there. Food, clothes, because the zipper had been ripped out of the tent. And you could look in the tent, and you could still see women's clothes, kids' clothes. I mean, the food was outside. It was still pretty fresh in the cooler. Of course, the ice done melted, turned to water. But there was food in there. There was a water bag hanging. I mean, everything was there. Well, one of the guys with us happened to be a government official. I'm going to say it like that, what he was. I'm not going to say what branch or anything. Well, we said, we might need to figure out what's going on here. So he did enter the tent. He did find personal identification of a woman. And he took the personal information and turned it in to the game wardens, who have a place pretty close by. They took the information that we never heard nothing else from it. That tent sat there for another month before the Forest Service or the game wardens cleaned that tent up. It's like whatever that person did, they either left in a hurry and just left out. But I can't believe they left their personal identification there. There was kids' clothes in there, makeup. I mean, it's like they either jumped in the car and left real quick, or something else went on. We just don't know. Muted again.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, yeah. So it was it was accessible by a vehicle, like there was a vehicle where you could
There
park
could have
those.
been a vehicle sit there, yes.
Any like fresh tire marks or I mean it's
Not like somebody would jumped in the car and hit the gas and throw dirt. Didn't really see that. Looking at the food in the cooler, I'm gonna say it was at least 3 or 4 days before we got there because the water had done got warm in the cooler. Of course, the stuff in the cooler done spoiled. It was just very strange, very strange.
the first hunter that we were speaking of that you were able to read a document. Was there head trauma?
Was there what?
Head trauma.
The only thing that report said was that it told about the body descriptions. But I talked about heavy bruising. That's the only thing it mentioned in that report. I don't know if there's more paperwork with that. I'm assuming there'd be several pages of it. But I ain't never really looked at a coroner's report, so I don't know what they're really supposed to really look like. Somebody told me I needed to go to that county, which is next door to me, and probably see if I could ask for those records. So they probably should be public. You should be able to pull those records and, officially look at it and see what they say. In other words, they say go to the police department itself and see if they can pull them. From the 80s ought to be pretty still fresh to pull, I would think.
I tried to pull one that had this would be in the 70s because I was a pretty small kid. We had a mother and I can't remember if it was 3 or 4 kids that were found deceased in the woods. But even as a child, what really gets me, and I guess as you probably can hear my neighbor's vehicle, the heads were bashed in. And I remember them saying you had a mother, there were doorstep babies. And I think the oldest one would have been a toddler, or I don't know how that goes, but they were like an infant, a small kid, and a little bit, they're like doorstep babies.
Yeah, we call them knee babies here.
Yeah. Well, I never had kids, so I don't know the toddler and whatever. I know kittens and puppies and baby possums, but they all had. I remember the elders talking about it. They were like something picked them up and slammed their heads against a tree. And, even as a kid, I'm like, wow, that was a strong man. That had to be a strong man. And growing up now, looking back, was it a Sasquatch, Bigfoot? Was it a cryptid? I mean, but I tried to go back when I got into law enforcement and tried to pull those records and couldn't get them. Whether they were gone or I got stonewalled. And but that was like, I weren't thinking like Bigfoot or whatever. I just remember, I mean, at the time, Bigfoot didn't even, care less about it. I worked at a little town that was so mean, you just try to survive getting home. It was just like little Dodge City. But I just remembered it as a child. and I was always curious what the case file would read, because this was when everything was still in folders. They weren't downloaded to computers, and I couldn't get a hold of it. But I just, as now, the more I learn, the more I think, was it a Bigfoot or was it I don't like the term dog man. I call him a canine cryptid. But what kind of person can pick a grown woman up and hit her so hard against a tree and cause that kind of trauma?
Yeah, I don't know of a man that could do it.
I don't know of anyone with a heart that could do it to an infant or children either. But that always stayed with me because it happened right down the road from our home. It's down dirt road, yeah.
And yeah, that's
very, very famous. It was very, very like around the area. Everybody knew about it. And I still talk about it sometimes.
Well, the guy I mentioned a while ago, Mr. Bill White, or as he went by in the Bigfoot world, Tal Banco, he was a sheriff investigator for Benton County, Arkansas for I don't know how many. This man was in the law enforcement for a long time. Then he got involved in house building, and then he became security for a lot of mining companies.
Like executive protection.
Yeah. And
good money.
A friend of mine, the guy I used to research with, or we still do, we're still good friends. He just don't research as much. He lives a mile and a half from me now. He's the one that had Bigfoot coming on his property. And Mr. Towle was able to pull this report. I don't know how he done it. I don't know if he had some persuasion since he was a sheriff investigator. But what happened was there used to be a little nightclub right over here off the highway. And one night, the club or the bar calls the county sheriff's department. It says they got this big man out around the bar scaring folks. He's got a big hairy coat on. They couldn't figure it. People would get glimpses of it. So the deputy pulls up, and he was our county's first black deputy that they had hired. This is when they got segregation, and he was a good fella. I knew him. He knew my father well. He was a very good deputy. In fact, he became high up in the sheriff's department after a while. But that night he pulls up. I never did get to talk to him personally about it. Wish I would have. But they said he pulls up, and some of the people in the bar had come out and said, "Hey, it's round back. The guy's round back. He's just throwing stuff at people and just acting crazy, So, he walks around there with his flashlight. And of course, back in, they probably didn't have very good flashlights like we do now. But they said he pulled his flashlight out and he had something real big looking at him. And one of the bar people was with him that was in the bar, and he said, "That ain't no man." And he pulls his service revolver out and empties it into it. And it takes off running. And he goes back and calls for backup. And all this. And of course, they get all down. I don't know how many more come in there with him. And probably some of the city police that were close by. But there's two towns right there close to each other. So I imagine some of those showed up. Tell them, state troopers may have showed up. But they found some blood. And there was an official report. Mr. Towle was able to pull that report. I don't know how he done it. I don't know how, if he had some persuasion or what. But he had a way of getting the information out of folks. And but I actually got to see that report myself. And it actually talked about him emptying his revolver. Because I guess when you shoot a bullet, you got to be accountable for it. What all took place. And this thing was like 7-8 pages. And, what all they went through. And and he put on there unknown, how do you put it? Unknown subject. Or unknown suspect. Or I forgot how it was worded exactly. In other words, he kind of wrote it like, I don't know what this was. They didn't make him change it or nothing. But that was talked about around here for a long time. Then it kind of over the years, it's kind of went down. But Mr. Towle even put that in his book when he wrote his book. He put that about that deputy sheriff implementing his revolver. Of course, back then I think he was just toting no standard 357, and back that was probably standard issue in that time. That would have been in the late 70s when that took place. So
I know when they used to carry the revolvers, and this is not even relevant to what we're talking about, but I know back then when they used to carry the revolvers, they would automatically, when they'd reload, dump their brass in their hand and put it in their pocket. And I know I used to hear tales of the old, I hate to say old timers, but the ones that they were finishing their career when I was starting my career, and they would say, when they were involved in, discharging the firearm, they would spend hours looking for the shell casings, and they would be in their pocket because they'd fall back on their training, and they're looking for them on the ground. But when they went to reload, they automatically, the gunfire.
right.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But that's one that I actually got to read, and then when he wrote that book, I think it is in there. He wrote about that deputy sheriff emptying the revolver, and I don't think he puts a report in the book, though. He didn't put that part. He just wrote some about it, and I think he was in the process of writing another book, and then he got sick and passed away. But
well, we have been going on for about 2 hours, and I guess in a few moments I'm going to need to wrap it up. But if you think about it, back during the day when we had, the old school box style Crown Vics and the really dim headlights we had, the terrible flashlights we had, and nothing was built up. Back in the 70s and 80s, nothing was built up. And, you had people zipping down those back roads, and those back then cars were cars, they were built like tanks. And the old, I remember the old LTDs, and they were just like little tanks. And the Camaro, no, what were they? Eldorado, what was the truck kind of?
El Camino.
Exactly. And well, I don't know what I just did, but but well, there we go. Let me go back to banners. No, what? Okay, it's just going to stay up there, sir. Um, could you imagine the area's not built up? You got mostly trees everywhere you go. Even the the main towns back where we grew up were small towns, and I mean, my sister lives in a town of like 30 people. It's like a Norman Rockwell. It never changed in time. I live, in a town of 500 people. I was in my 40s, and imagine back then being in law enforcement or working fire or even medical, and you're on those back roads and you have these really dim headlights and these really dim flashlight and nothing's built up. Imagine if we had the technology back then, the good headlights we have now, the good flashlights we had. Can you imagine what we probably would have seen, or what they probably could have seen in those woods as they're zipping down the road?
I guarantee. We would probably be a lot further along than we are now.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more people have seen stuff. They just don't really want to talk about it. And I believe a lot more law enforcement see it because they're out patrolling, or the game wardens, especially the game wardens, because they're in sometimes way back in the woods. And of course, military, we don't even need to get down that road, but ain't no telling what military has seen, so.
And well, I know we're at Fort Bragg, and I've got some of my best stories of the canine type cryptid going back to the 80s, at least early 80s. And, the Bigfoot Sasquatch. And it's just like they just congregate. And I know when Fort Bragg used to give us radars. And the deal was, we would, just before they locked the bases down, the deal was, our county backed up to their base. We would run radar on their secondary, like really dark roads, nothing but woods, Fort Bragg, it's just dark. And we would get on the back road that would, cut through the back part of Fort Bragg and be on right there. Well, technically in our county, and we would run radar for them. And there was this one area that I would just get creeped out, and I could not understand why. I just felt like I was being watched. And it was just like, oh, you're just sitting in your car trying to, do your job. You're like, oh, I got to get out of here. And you could feel it. And later on, when I got into, the Bigfoot community and the canine cryptid, started meeting people with those, and you start hearing these stories, I'm like, makes sense. So I would love to get some more stories from the military that encountered them on the bases.
We hear a lot from around the Fort Benning area.
Mm-hmm.
And then you used to have a fort right north of us. Part of it's still up there, but Fort McClellan. That was the MPs, the WACs, which was the Women's Auxiliary back then, and the Chemical Warfare Training Base. It's right there. It was right there in Anniston, Alabama. It's about 40 miles north of here. And I've heard a lot of stuff from Anniston. Anniston has the Chakalaka Monster, which was in the newspapers and everything back in the 1930s. Even the sheriff of that county put a posse together. Back then they called it a posse. He put a posse together and went looking for this thing. I mean, it's in the newspapers and everything. It's pretty cool to read about it. And then, of course, we had another county that was having problems with Bigfoot, and it was the sheriff of that county was investigating it. They even had the footprints in the courthouse for a long time where they cast footprints. And they called him the Peach Monster because he was getting in the peach orchards. So people was losing a bunch of peaches and finding footprints, and then some people finally seen it, and sheriff, this was in the 50s. The sheriff went in there and investigated it. They even tracked it into a creek bottom and tried to send some deputies in there, and the deputies said, I ain't going down in there with that thing.
No, that's not my pay grade, sir. Not my pay grade.
Right. Yeah.
So looking back, the people you meet, and I do want to touch on the community before we close out. You have built a really good community around your channel. And once again, I wrote it down because I slaughter everything. And it is Creek Bottom.
Cedar Creek Bottoms. Farmstead Live.
This, and you know what? I had cheat notes because anyone that and it's no disrespect because I'm.
Oh, I know.
I get the little bell rings every time you go on. It's like ding ding. I'm like, I gotta go watch it. But you have created such a warm, welcoming environment, and it's Rebecca, it's you, it's the people in your chat, and it's a really incredible experience. And if anyone's listening, your YouTube channel is going to be in the description, but you have built a really good community just around fellowship and Bigfoot.
Yeah, thank you. And I hope it continues to stay that way. I've told a lot of time, I told Rebecca, I said, sometimes I hope we don't grow much more. I like it where we're at because I can interact with everybody. And like I told her too, if we grow, I'd rather grow in quality than quantity. I'd rather keep that feel going. And I've had a lot of people from our channel comment, please, Mark, leave it like you got it. We love it. And you're doing the same thing. I like your show. I don't always get to watch every one of them, but I try to when I have time. And I feel the same way because you make people feel at home too. I mean, you got Rebecca to go talking. That's pretty good because she was a little nervous about this, and I left. I went to my council meeting, so she was on her own right here, and I mean I went back and listened to it. I mean, you got her to just start talking, and that made you make people feel at
Yeah.
ease, and that's a good thing.
Maybe they gravitate toward my weirdness, sir.
Well, all of us are weird, you know.
Normal's overrated. I will
Yeah,
say this: I'd rather have 4 quarters than 100 pennies.
yeah, that's right. And it's I think uh, all our channels are going to do well um, because we try to be human and not just talk about the inhumanoids, cryptids, whatever you want to call them. Sometimes I just call them the entities. I use different names for them all the time, but uh, we want to talk about people. What do you like as far as food? I mean, I know that's a wild subject, but we want to hear what people like. And I mean, we've read some stuff in our chats that I never thought about, or what gardening they like to do, or what hunting or fishing, or just anything to get people to talk that's not around the Bigfoot, but just being a human, and
I will say this: you never know who drops in the chat that needed that.
right, and I don't know how many people I get comments about the prayer. They really, uh, really. I've got a lot of comments that hey, I needed that prayer, and I can feel all them people praying for me, and that makes you feel good that you've got a platform. It's not me; it's all the good Lord. I mean, I'll tell you people real quick, like it ain't me; it's the good Lord. But we got to give Him all honor and praise and glory. That it belongs to Him, and I think a lot of times this platform was built for that. I think that's something that, and I'll tell you this, and I know we need to get off because I don't want to wear you out because I can go 4 o'clock in the morning talking, but
No, you're fine. You're
uh,
fine.
I was walking around my pond one day doing one of my fireside chats, the videos I do. I hadn't done much this summer. We finally done one today, so sometime or another it'll be released the next few days. But and it wasn't even about Bigfoot. It's about the Creek Indian War that happened here in Alabama back in the 1800s. At a battleground. But I was walking around this pond doing one of my fireside chats, and all of a sudden it's just like my daddy was talking to me, the way he would talk to me when I was growing up. Hey boy, why ain't you praying during these videos? And I stopped. And I know when the video come out, people probably went, why Mark just stop for a minute, quit talking? And anyway, I went in and ended that video and shut the camera off and started walking by the house. He said, hey, you heard me. I mean, just like my daddy would talk, in that tone of voice. Hey, stern, but not mean or nothing, but stern. And I knew then who was talking to me. And I stopped myself. From now on, every video will have a prayer in it. And I have tried. I think there was one time I goofed up into the video without saying a prayer, and I got messages on that. I got, hey, why didn't you end the thing in prayer? Hey, I mean, I was like, I got chastised a little bit. so in our lives and on my videos, I tried to always make sure, I end with a prayer, and it's not for me; it's for the glory of the Lord. That's who it belongs to.
Well, the Bible says where 2 or more comes together as one, there I'll be in the midst.
That's true. That's true.
I always get that verse wrong. I think it's where 2 or more comes together as one, there I'll be in the midst. But the nuts and bolts of it is as a community when you praise there, would you?
That's it.
And,
And
and
go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
All I was gonna say is, I've told everybody that I've always going to mention Jesus Christ in my videos, and I do. Somewhere in that video, His name is going to come up, and even if it's just in the end of the prayer. I know YouTube does not like it. I know it hurts a lot of people's, the rhythms. But one guy told me, he said, "Man, your channel could grow like crazy, but you're gonna have to lay off a little bit on a few things." So I'm not doing it. That's what my channel is about. It's about people and about Christ. Yeah, the Bigfoot comes in and out, some other stuff, but I said, really, it's about humans and Christ. So.
The world needs a little bit more prayer, and that's just how
It does.
When I go on your show on the 23rd, I'll talk about the power of prayer. And because I know I agreed to come on and talk about my near-death experience, and and it's pretty. It'll be a little bit dark, but it'll be honest and it'll be true. And I may be a lot of things, but I'll give it to you raw, whether you want to hear it or not. And sometimes that's a fault.
Well, I think people need to hear stuff, but we whitewash stuff too much, and I think sometimes we need to hear the rough things to make us appreciate when we got good things, and appreciate that we got a God that really loves us as much as He does. And anything when you come on with us, anything you want to talk about, you're welcome to. I don't try to hold people back if they're willing to talk and they feel like they got a message they need to get across to people or what they need. I'm all for it because I think that's what we're here for, is to help each other and hear what's going on.
We'll talk about that on the 23rd. At the end of every video, I try to give people the time to pay tribute to someone. But before I do that, I want to say, I appreciate you. I enjoy hearing your experiences. And I know we could have went on and on, but you and Becca will be coming to do a live video, and that'll be more geared toward more Bigfoot experiences, and where we just hang out and talk Bigfoot. But I appreciate you and appreciate the work that the two of you put in, and I love the fact that you love your wife. And give sister a pat on the head for me. And I'll spray Swamp Key with a water bottle for you. All right, I'm gonna give you the screen and let you pay your tribute. Okay.
Okay. Well, of course, I have a lot of people to tribute to. It's hard to pick out any one person. I've had a lot of influences in my life, of course, backing up my wife, but also backing up my parents. But one person that I really looked up to in my life, I would say in the cryptid world, was Bill White, Mr. Tal Banco. Just a Southern gentleman, always willing to talk to me, discuss all kind of problems, even in the personal stuff. I always had very good advice for me. So I would say he was my mentor in the Bigfoot subject. Regular world, of course, would be my wife, my parents, and other kin people, and a lot of friends through my life. So it's hard to pick out any one person on this. Kind of hard to, but I have a lot of good influences in my lifetime.
Mark, I've really enjoyed this. I look forward to many more conversations with you and your beautiful wife. I will be on the road this Saturday. We're going upstate New York. So this will hit Saturday while we're on the road. And it's been a pleasure. And I think I already figured out the title for the thumbnail, and I hope you like it.
I will. I appreciate you having me on. Look forward to having you on next Friday night. That's right, a week from Friday. So
Yes,
look
sir.
forward to having you on, and really enjoyed it, and I really like your channel, and I really enjoy talking to you. And I can tell we think a lot alike on a lot of things. So, which all us Southerners seem to do. So,
My lieutenant used to say there's indoor dogs and there are outdoor dogs. And when you figure out your place, life is a lot easier. And I told him I'd be on the porch with outdoor dogs for a while.
Well, I feel a little kindred towards you.
I appreciate it.
Even we talked about that yesterday or whatever that. Yeah. Well, I can't remember now yet. Forgive me. But, I told you some of my people come from that area. So, and what some of my heritage was. So I already feel some kindred towards you. And even more talking with you tonight, feel more kin. Because I think of everybody in the YouTube family. They're family to me now. They're starting to be brothers and sisters. And so I feel the same way toward you as I do a lot of them other ones. They're family.
Thank you. I consider that an honor. And if you got some of that Robertson County blood in you, you got a wild streak in you somewhere, sir. So stay true to
Well, Rebecca tell you I got bulldog in me, the head bulldog, she calls it. So, it comes out there once in a blue moon. So.
All right. Well, Mark, I really appreciate it. Give sister a pat on the head and tell Becca I said hello, and she's a wonderful woman, and thank you.
I sure appreciate it. I thank you for having us on. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.